Welcome to Talk World Radio, a half-hour discussion of politics as if the people mattered. I'm David Swanson. This week on Talk World Radio, we are speaking with Andy Shallal about his new book, A Seat at the Table, The Making of Busboys and Poets. Those of you watching can see me holding up the beautiful cover. Andy Shallal, welcome back to Talk World Radio.
Thank you so much, David. Pleasure to be with you.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for everything you've been doing, including everything that's covered in this book. For anyone who's been living under a rock for 20 years or isn't from Washington, D.C. and has never come to events in Washington, D.C., what is Busboys and Poets?
Busboys and Poets is really a community gathering space. It's a cultural center. It's a restaurant. It's a bar. It's a gathering space. It's a stage. We have a stage that we've got many events and programs on it. We do poetry on a regular basis. You've been on that stage several times, David. Others, of course, have also been there. We also have a bookstore that we're very proud of, a great bookstore that has great selection of books in there. And so it's a little bit of everything that I think most activists and most people that are interested in finding community can find.
It's absolutely wonderful. I don't know how cities and towns get along without it, how we would have done without it the past 20 years in the Washington, D.C. area. And there are now 8 of them, right? Not just the original.
Yeah. 8 locations, exactly.
But this book ends with the creation of the first one, and it begins with you coming to the United States in 1966. What was that like?
Well, it's like landing on a alien planet. It was a very it was a cultural shock. An 11-year-old boy who's coming here to America. We only see America at that time through the movies and through series on television. It was cowboys and Indians. That's what I grew up with as a child, imagining what America is. It's these cowboys that swagger and walk around and like bigger than life and always get the bad guys who were always the Indians at that time. And so came here and suddenly like this country is very different than we had expected. I actually thought that the sidewalks moved. That's how America was sold to us. Then there's a cultural shock in America that is quite flawed, that has many, many different issues that they struggle with. Certainly race was a major one, confronted with that in school and, growing up in this city, in DC and in this country, really was a different perspective than I had expected it to be.
And you lived in Annandale, Virginia in the 60s, right? I grew up in Reston, Virginia in the 70s.
Okay, that's down the road. Yep.
Yeah. I'm not totally shocked by the fact that you ran into racism within minutes of arriving, right?
Mm. Yeah, my uncle who was here, who was living already here and going to school at George Washington University, was studying international law, was immediately took note of me, particularly. I have also siblings, but me particularly took note of my skin color, my when I had hair, my woolly hair, as he called it, and really kind of berated me about my skin color, which was very, very odd, very strange, and admonished my father to make sure that he doesn't let us play in the sun too much because America is not friendly to Black people, and I looked a little bit too much like maybe a Black person to be able to get away with it.
And he wasn't completely wrong, right? This was something you ran up against over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, but I wished I had a better introduction to race than that. A different place to kind of turn to and talk to, but I felt very isolated and did not feel like there was any community that I can turn to because back then it was Black and white or other, and I didn't fit in the Black category. I did not fit in the white category, and no kid wants to be the other. especially coming to a foreign country. So this other kind of is a holding spot for anybody else who, was whatever, whether you're Asian, whether you're Latino, whether you're biracial, whatever you are, you fit into that other category. And that was a real challenge because, again, in school, you have to fill out forms, and there were lots of forms that every time I had to fill one out, we had to choose which you are. And I was always embarrassed to kind of pick. I didn't know what to pick. I wasn't white, I wasn't black, I didn't want to be the others. So it was a very strange place. And I oftentimes would leave it blank. And then the teacher, or whoever is filling it out, would look at me and either make a decision for them, depending on what their perspective was, or ask me point blank, at which time I just shake my shoulder and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, race is a very strange thing here in this country, particularly.
Another part of your growing up, for better or worse, and I think for many of us it ended up being for better, was that you end up working in a family restaurant, an Italian family restaurant, right?
Yeah, I mean, my father was a diplomat and really did not have the skills of running a restaurant. So he really didn't even think of operating a restaurant. That wasn't in his wheelhouse of knowledge. He had a PhD in literature. And so for him, running a restaurant was very, very foreign. And he was a diplomat, so he never really worked in restaurants, never, we actually hardly ate out as a family. And so for him to jump into a restaurant was really uncharacteristic of him, for sure. But it was a series of things that happened where a friend of his who was also from Iraq had a restaurant, had recently went through some health issues and needed to get out of the business and retire. And my father, who was, there and needed a job, needed something to do, the guy convinced him that owning a restaurant was not a bad thing and fairly easy, here in America. So he went ahead and took it. I'm not sure about the easy part, but certainly it did okay for him, although he hated the restaurant business. He wasn't into it at all.
But you didn't immediately think of it as your future career, but you didn't completely hate it, right?
No, I actually enjoyed it. For me, we worked. I was about 13 at the time when he got the restaurant. We worked. My brother and I, who was my brother was 15 at the time, we worked. Evenings after school. We would come in and wash dishes, or roll pizza, or do something. And then on the weekends, especially on Sundays, because his manager was off that day, we would basically run the show, my brother and I. And it was actually a lot of fun because we were able to, you know, have the run of the place ourselves, be able to have, sometimes our friends would come in, and it's kind of cool to be able to buy somebody and order French fries or a Coke or something, and while they're there. So it was a fun experience for me, and I loved serving. I loved the fact that by having food, people show up. People come to you. So that was kind of cool. And that was a but for my father, of course, it was completely different. He really did not like it. So I had to kind of keep that to myself for a long time. I didn't want to tell him I really enjoyed this because
Yeah.
as a child of immigrant parents, a lot of immigrant parents come and work in the service industry with the hopes that their children will become quote unquote professionals. So for my parents, it was, I was going to be a doctor. My brother was going to be an engineer, and that was that. So it made it was a difficult transition to sort of get out of that and do my own thing.
If you could have said, I'm going to own 8 unique and wonderful restaurants slash event spaces slash bookstores slash community hubs, I think that might have gone over better.
I think I'm not sure. I think still it was. I think he would have preferred me having a desk job with a secretary and having more quote unquote professional. They were not into the idea of business. Business was seen as something less than. Business is like a hustle,
Yeah.
is something that they saw as a career. But I looked at it very differently.
Well,
I I love what I do. I love serving. I love the whole idea of service. To me, it's the most honorable thing you can do.
I'm certainly grateful that you do. We benefit from it. We can't, I don't think we can go through all the career steps, but there are a number of jobs and other restaurants along the way, successes and failures. How did you, in short, get from helping out in the parents' shop to
Right.
Boys and Poets?
Well, I I I knew fairly early on in college that I really did not want to go to in the medical field, whatever that is, whether I was going to do research, whether I was going to get a PhD in something, or whether I was going to be a doctor. I knew I didn't want to do that. But I, plow through once you're in and you're in. And I was very young. I started college at 15. And so by the time I was just trying to figure out who I was and what I was and all that stuff. And so it was a complicated place to be in at that age and being in college and not really knowing English very well. And so for me, it was kind of like I never imagined that I was going to own a restaurant. That wasn't going to be my thing. But I started working in restaurants after I got out of college, and after I dropped out of my medical studies, I started working as a waiter, not thinking that this is going to be a career, but just because I knew how to do it. And it was a short term stopover, basically,
Yeah.
uh, an opportunity because, with being a waiter, you can get cash right away and you can always have a meal. So it was an easy decision at that moment, but with the intention that, I wanted to figure out what is it that I want to do later in life? What is it that I want to study? What is it that I want to maybe go back to school for or something like that? And, by certain situations that took place, I was able to advance in the restaurant business. Really, I guess my will almost, because I did not want to be advancing in the restaurant business. I wanted to do something else. Even though I enjoyed it, it never occurred to me that this would be a career per se. It was always going to be fun, but a career was something else. A career is not supposed to be fun. A career is supposed to be to get, food on the table and, have some respect from the community and the people around you and all of that. So that never was a thing to be in the restaurant business. It never appeared to me that way. But I really didn't care. It was for me, it was a not only fun, but I'm able to make a living out of it. Not a great living at that time. Nothing. I wasn't making a lot of money, and I was barely kind of squeaking by. But it was enough for me to enjoy life basically and be able to work in a job that I actually look forward to going to. And finally landed in hotels where the hotel because I thought hotels were, wide open opportunities for career development in the hospitality business. So being in a hotel, you can work in many different departments. You can become a hotel general manager, which I always thought was like the most idyllic job because you can, have room service every day. Somebody cleans your room and you just walk downstairs to work.
Right.
And that seemed like a logical thing, although be careful what you wish for sometimes. But I worked in hotels, and through a couple of situations that took place there, I really thought that I was being set aside because of my background, because of my ethnicity, my religion, my whatever. And I was set aside and looked over. Also, I had a speech impediment, which didn't help, and that made it harder for me to be able to advance. And so I was looked over with a job that I thought was I was very qualified for, and I decided, you know what? I'm not going to make it in this world in a sense in somebody else's standards. I need to create my own. And so that really kind of set me on a path to find my own place and be able to open it. And I didn't care whether it was going to be a food truck or whether it was going to be a hole in the wall. It was, I was going to be my own boss.
And so you end up remaking the family restaurant into something
Exactly.
new
Yep.
with some
Yep.
success.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I decided to go back. And, at that point, my relationship with my family was really strained. Um, Having seen me go into dropping out of medical studies, having seen me become a waiter, that was something that they really did not savor at all and did not like. And so my relationship with them was quite strained. But I went back, swallowed my pride, and asked for some startup money from my father, which was very little at the time, to be able to go back to the family business, which at that time was teetering on really closing. It wasn't doing super well at that point. Hasn't been there for years and years and years, and not really paid attention to in the way that it should have been. And I told my father, I said, I'd come back and resurrect it. And I did. I came back and reinvented the place, spruced it up, little paint, little carpentry, good menu, simple menu, and it took off magically. It took off so well that we ended up selling it actually after about a year and a half, 2 years, and I broke away from the family business basically by having my own place at that point because even though I was I set up that place and made it happen, it was still under my father's oversight basically, and he was basically the owner and I was basically working there, although I made all the decisions on that, so I felt like an owner but not really fully. I wanted to break away and make it my own, so I did, and I opened up a couple places in DC. um, Really got started connecting with the community there, became very politically active, and then decided, you know what, I need to combine my politics because I love politics and I'm very involved in activism along with what I do in my career. And so food and restaurants were a natural setting for the political interest that I had. It was the perfect stage for that. So I started moving in the direction of opening Busboys and Poets.
I know there was one restaurant called Skewers that I think was before my time in DC, and then Mimi's, which I think was where I first met you, being invited there by Ralph Nader's organization to gatherings of staff people at different nonprofit organizations to talk about strategies together, which I thought was very interesting. So you could see some seeds of Busboys and Poets
Yeah,
happening
for
there.
sure, for sure. Yeah, I opened Beamies, which was a an artistic place that attracted artists, the theater people. It was had singing servers, and it was a really cool place. And I remember Ralph used to come in there because I also used it for those other things that you said, for gatherings of activists and strategizing and talking about Israel and Palestine. We had a regular series going on called the Peace Cafe that we did there.
Yep.
And I remember Ralph used to come sometimes and they'd be like singing servers. And he'd say, could you please tell them to stop singing? And I said, well, the theme of the restaurant is singing servers. I can't really. We have to go in a different corner to be able to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But funny. Yeah, so you know, that place did really well. And then I knew that it was just not practical to have a place that has singing servers that also becomes a place that has activism at its core,
Right.
especially since there was no other private room in this space. It was just one big space. So we had to work around the schedule of the restaurant basically to make the other stuff happen. So it would be either early in the morning, it'd be sometime mid-afternoon. We couldn't do it during peak business hours, during dinner, obviously. We couldn't do it in the middle of lunch. So it really kind of limited the kind of events you can have. And so I wanted to then move in a different direction and say, we need to have the restaurant, of course, is the engine that moves everything else, but we need to also have the other stuff that is equally important, in my opinion. But we need to have it done in a way that is not going to interfere with the other part of running a restaurant. And so having a room that is separate in each one of our locations that has a great stage, that has a good sound system, that has good lighting, all of that was really important because I even saw, like, for instance, there are many places that were doing poetry and poetry programming, but the poetry be done in the bar. There'd be somebody shaking a drink or doing a blender or something while the poet is reading. And I always thought that was like it took away from the intimacy of that kind of an experience when a poet is reading a poem. And I thought, well, if I could do this well, if I could do it on a stage, if I could have the respect that the poet deserves with a great sound system, great lights, and all that, it would be really, really cool to do. And sure enough, that's what we did. So we have stages in each one of the locations. There are good sound system. There's a screen to show films or slideshows or PowerPoint presentations, whatever it may be. And
Separate
that came
room
about.
set with the doors closed and separate lighting, and people
Yeah,
can do something else in the rest of the restaurant.
exactly.
Yeah. The stage is key. Was it something of an accident due to a parking garage being under the floor?
Yes, you clearly read the book, David. Yes, the space that we got, the first space was at 14th and V. It was a large space, about 7,000 square feet, but there was this bump at the end of it in the corner, and I, you know, when there's something that is kind of looked like a flaw, and there was a bump, and so I couldn't figure out why was there a bump? Can we just remove the bump? Just kind of dig it out. And they said no, because that that is, the reason why there's a bump there is because there's an underground garage from the back, and so they had to make the underground garage higher for cars to be able to get in. And so that's why it's kind of there's a bump up in the place. And it was, it's a square about maybe 20 feet by 20 feet and about three feet high off the ground. So we looked at it and I remember thinking, what can you do with that? You can turn it into storage space. You can turn it into an office. You can turn it into a liquor storage room or something like that. But it seemed like it was kind of a waste to use up so much space for that purpose.
Yeah.
And then the idea of the stage came through. And so it was like, okay, it's already there. It's yelling at me, saying, I am a stage, use me. And so I finally listened. And so we created this beautiful stage called the Langston Hughes stage. And that stage has been the home for so many really amazing, incredible events that we've done throughout the years.
Yeah.
So it became a prototype really for other locations. So now we have to go and build a stage in the location as opposed to have one already made for us.
It's a remarkable account because I think of the stage as being central. I think of it as always having been there. This is, Busboys and Poets. It's always been there, and yet it wasn't. It had to happen by accident. And the previous building you were going to get, that deal had to fall through. So you get this one, all this
Yes, yes, yeah,
circumstance.
yeah.
It's you'll say it's a crazy comparison, but it's like when you watch this video of Paul McCartney thinking up one of these songs that you've known since you were 6 years old, like, wow, that could have gone a totally different way,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
so
True,
it's
true.
a remarkable book to read. You're hiring people to work at the original Busboys and Poets at 14th and V, and one of the cooks is wonderful but wants to do strictly vegan. um,
Yes.
and I want to ask you about this topic because there are people who argue that the livestock industry is a major threat, like the fossil fuel industry, to life on earth. But you want to make food that people are going to buy and eat, right? So how do you deal with that issue?
Well, we made sure that the livestock that we use, as you said, like the beef that we use is grass fed. So it's not beef that is lined up in cages for the entire lifetime of the animal before they're slaughtered. It's we actually went and visited the farms and looked at different ways of being able to procure these items. Also, the chickens are all antibiotic free. They're not injected with hormones. They are somewhat free range, not completely free range, but somewhat free range because they actually open up their cages with a certain amount of time every day. It's halal chicken as well. So we try to do our best to really try to bring in products that are better for the environment and better for the body. And but also I think, having the vegan chef at the beginning, which I thought a vegan chef can easily do the other food, because vegan food is very specialized and very much more difficult to really do good vegan food than it is to do standard food, non-vegan stuff. And I thought, she could easily adjust her way to creating the other food. And she had said that at the interview. It wasn't like it was a surprise, but I think she pulled a, kind of a beta switch and decided maybe if I loved the vegan food so much that I would just back off from the other food. But for me, it wasn't just about, the food. It was about creating community. How can you use food to bring people together? And if I had opened it up as a vegan restaurant, it would have been a very different place. It would not have had the variety of people that come in there, would not have had the opportunities for people to intersect with each other they otherwise wouldn't. Veganism at that time, especially back in 2005, was a word that very few people knew what it even meant.
No.
Let alone, actually live that lifestyle. So it was a hard decision, but I think it was a necessary one. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked.
No, the 2004, I was trying to get Dennis Kucinich elected president, and the only topic anyone would ever talk about was that he was a vegan. So
I think right, and he probably made veganism like a thing that people started to ask, what is it?
I think so, but he didn't have any political policies. It was just veganism, according to the media. We've got just a minute or two left, Andy. We haven't talked about the incredible art and activism, the mural behind you, the historians and scholars and activists that are in this book as well. I wanted to ask you, though, do you know if other cities are developing things like Busboys and Poets? Because I don't know of anywhere else that has such a great venue. And it seems like there are so many other cities on earth that should. It shouldn't be just Washington, D.C.
Well, I think it's a hard mix, because I've been trying to sort of open it up in other cities and find opportunities to have that happen. Not that I would run it myself. I want other people to run it. But it's really hard to find someone who has the political sensibilities, the activism, that also can run a business. Sometimes there's one kind of contradicts the other. I don't know why, but it does frequently. And so trying to find that one individual who's able to do both and be able to do it in a way that feels organic and not forced.
Yeah.
Like have had the lived experiences in that, it's not as easy as one would think. So I've been talking to other, like, for instance, I've been talking to some folks in Denver who want to do a pop-up Busboys Poets. Try it out, do it for a few months and find out if there's people that actually can help to make it happen.
Yeah.
So I'm working with them on that.
Yeah. So, I wish we could go on, but we're out of minutes. We've been speaking with Andy Shallal. The book is called A Seat at the Table, The Making of Busboys and Poets. Andy, thanks for everything you're doing and for coming on Talk World Radio.
Thank you, and I'll see you soon. Take care.
This is Talk World Radio. I'm David Swanson. Take action at rootsaction.org. Help end war at worldbeyondwar.org. Read or listen to today's Peace Almanac entry at peacealmanac.org. All past shows can be heard at talkworldradio.org. Talk World Radio is produced in Charlottesville, Virginia, and syndicated by Pacifica Network. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way.